The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what waited beyond. When they finally reached those distant lights, they came with open hands and hopeful hearts. They wanted to learn. They wanted to share. They wanted to belong. That was 200 years ago. Admiral Junho Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Times Dawn's Promise asterisk, and stared at the message on his screen. His face showed nothing. His hands did not shake. But inside his chest, something old and cold began to stir. The message was simple. Another human transport had been stopped by Velik's warships. 400 families were on board. Mothers, fathers, children. They were traveling to a new colony to start fresh lives. The Veliks had forced them off the ship and left them on a dead moon with 3 days of oxygen. Junho closed his eyes. He had been a soldier for 40 years. He had given orders that sent young men and women to their deaths. He had buried friends. He had seen horrors that would break lesser men, but he had always believed in peace. He had always believed that patience would win in the end. Now he was not so sure. On the other side of human space, Dr. Hannah Yoon sat in her small laboratory aboard the research vessel Times Horizon's Edge asterisk. She was reading the same reports that Junho had seen. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She had forgotten to eat. The words on her screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. Hannah had spent her entire life studying alien cultures. She had learned 7 languages. She had lived among 3 different species. She believed with all her heart that understanding could bridge any gap. She believed that if she could just make the other races see humanity clearly, everything would change. But they did not want to see. The Galactic Assembly had existed for 10,000 years before humans arrived. The elder races had built empires that spanned hundreds of worlds. They had fought wars that killed billions. They had risen and fallen and risen again. When humanity finally reached the stars, these ancient powers looked at the newcomers and saw nothing worth respecting. Humans were young. Humans were small. Humans came from a single planet in an unimportant corner of the galaxy. What could they possibly offer? Ambassador Taeho Kang knew the answer to that question. Humans had offered everything. They shared their music, their art, their science. They asked for nothing in return except friendship. They followed every rule. They respected every tradition. They bent over backward to prove they belonged. And still, they were treated like dirt beneath alien feet. Taeho sat in his office on the assembly station, surrounded by gifts from species who despised him. He had been Earth's voice among the stars for 30 years. In that time, he had smiled through insults. He had bowed when he wanted to stand tall. He had apologized for crimes humanity never committed. Last week, the Assembly had passed something called the Containment Directive. It limited humanity to 3 star systems. Only 3. For a population of 50 billion. When Taeho asked why, the Velik's representative had laughed in his face. "You breed too fast," the alien had said. "Like insects. We must contain you before you spread your filth across our galaxy." Taeho had not responded. He had simply nodded and returned to his seat. That night, alone in his quarters, he had wept for the first time in decades. Back on Earth, an old man named Jiho Baek watched the news from his hospital bed. He was 112 years old. His body was failing, but his mind remained sharp. He remembered things that most people had forgotten. He remembered the last war on Earth. He remembered the bombs that fell on cities. He remembered the screams, the fire, the endless death. He had been a young soldier then. He had done things that still haunted his dreams. After that war, humanity had sworn to never fight again. They had united their planet. They had put aside their differences. They had reached for the stars with the hope that space would be different. That out there, among the aliens, they could finally find peace. Jiho closed his eyes. He had believed in that dream. He had dedicated his life to it. But now, watching his people suffer, watching them be humiliated and killed, he felt something dark rising in his heart. The galaxy had no idea what it was waking up. On the frontier, a young captain named Minho Lee received orders to retreat. Velik soldiers had just executed 12 human miners. The miners had refused to abandon their claims. They had worked those rocks for 20 years. They had built homes there. They had raised children there. The Veliks had shot them in front of their families. Minho wanted to fight. Every fiber of his being screamed for justice. His crew felt the same. They had weapons. They had training. They could make the Veliks pay, but the orders were clear. Stand down. Maintain peace. Do not provoke. Minho followed his orders. He turned his ship around and flew away. But as he watched the Velik ships grow small on his screen, he made a silent promise. One day, there would be a reckoning. One day, those who hurt his people would answer for their crimes. In her laboratory, Hana finished compiling her report. 347 documented incidents of abuse against human civilians. Beatings. Thefts. Murders. She had evidence for all of it. Surely, when the assembly saw the truth, they would act. She was wrong. When she finally presented her findings, the assembly voted to table the discussion. Not reject it. Not even debate it. Simply set it aside. Like it did not matter. Like human lives did not matter. Hana stood in the great chamber, surrounded by representatives of 100 species, and realized something terrible. They would never listen. They would never care. To them, humans were nothing. That night, 400 families ran out of oxygen on a dead moon. The rescue ships arrived 6 hours too late. They found mothers holding their children. Frozen in the endless dark, Admiral Junho read the casualty report. He set it down carefully on his desk. He folded his hands. He sat in silence for a very long time. Somewhere deep inside him, a wall began to crack. Across human space, billions of people watched the news. They saw the faces of the dead. They heard the names of the children. They listened to the crying of the survivors, and something changed. It was not anger. Anger burns hot and fades quickly. This was different. This was cold. This was patient. This was the slow, quiet shift of a species that had finally had enough. No one knew it yet. Not the Veliks. Not the assembly. Not even the humans themselves. But the day was coming. The day when all that patience, all that kindness, all that desperate hope for peace would finally snap. And when it did, the galaxy would learn what humanity truly was. 6 months passed after the transport incident. The galaxy moved on. The assembly held its meetings. The elder races continued their ancient games of power. No one spoke of the 400 families who died on that frozen moon. But humanity remembered. Admiral Junho stood before a room of officers. Their faces were hard. Their eyes were tired. They had spent months watching their people suffer, following orders to do nothing. The strain was showing. How much longer? Someone asked. The voice came from a young lieutenant in the back. How much longer do we just take it? Junho had no answer. He had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. Every day brought new reports. Human ships boarded and searched. Human colonies harassed. Human citizens treated like criminals in their own homes. We follow orders, Junho said. We maintain peace. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. On the frontier world of New Busan, Captain Minho Lee walked through the ruins of a farming settlement. The Marathi collective had come 3 days ago. They claimed the planet had been misallocated in some ancient treaty. They gave the colonists 1 hour to leave. 12,000 people had built their lives here. They had worked the soil for 3 generations. They had buried their dead in this earth. Now they had nothing. Minho found an old woman sitting in the ashes of her home. She was holding a photograph of her grandchildren. She did not look up when he approached. They took everything, she whispered. We did nothing wrong. We followed all the rules. Why did they take everything? Minho knelt beside her. He had no words of comfort. There was no comfort to give. Back on Earth, Colonel Subin Choi walked through the deepest levels of military intelligence headquarters. She passed through 17 security checkpoints. She entered a room that officially did not exist. Inside, screens covered every wall. They showed data that would have shocked the galaxy. weapon designs, ship blueprints, military capabilities that humanity had kept hidden for 200 years. Subin had spent her career preparing for a day she hoped would never come. She had studied every species in the galaxy. She knew their strengths. She knew their weaknesses. She knew exactly how to defeat them. The elder races thought humans were primitive. They thought human technology was a century behind their own. They were very, very wrong. "Show me the fleet projections," Subin said. Her assistant pulled up a hologram. Thousands of ships appeared in the air. Battleships, carriers, destroyers, weapons, platforms, all hidden in deep space, all waiting. "We have enough," her assistant said quietly. Subin nodded. They had always had enough. They had simply chosen not to use it. That was the difference between humans and the elder races. Humans understood the cost of war. They had learned it through centuries of blood and fire on their own world. But understanding the cost did not mean being unable to pay it. In the assembly chamber, Dr. Hana Yoon finally received permission to address the full council. She had fought for months to get this moment. She had called in every favor. She had begged every ally. Now she stood before 1,000 alien representatives, her voice steady, her heart pounding. "I have documented 347 incidents of violence against human civilians," she said. "I have evidence. I have witnesses. I have the names of the dead." She spoke for 2 hours. She showed photographs of beaten colonists. She played recordings of weeping children. She read the names of the murdered, one by one, until her voice broke. When she finished, there was silence. Then the Velix representative stood. "This is very sad," he said. "But these are internal matters. The assembly has no jurisdiction." The vote was quick. The motion to investigate was rejected. Hana stood frozen as the representatives began to file out. Some of them were laughing. That night, Ambassador Tejo found her sitting alone in an empty corridor. Her face was blank. Her eyes were dry. She had no more tears left. "I believed in them," she said. "I believed that if I could just make them understand, they would help us." Tejo sat beside her. He had believed the same thing once. "A long time ago." "What do we do now?" Hana asked. Tejo had no answer. 1 week later, a Velix battlecruiser entered orbit around a neutral world. Below it, a human medical station floated in space. The station served patients from 12 different species. It was a place of healing, open to all. There had been some minor dispute about docking fees. The Velix captain decided to make an example. He ordered his weapons to fire. 2,000 people died in the first 30 seconds. Doctors, nurses, patients, children in the recovery ward, families visiting their loved ones. The station broke apart like a toy under the assault. The attack was broadcast across human space. Every network carried it. Every screen showed the same images. Fire and debris and bodies tumbling through the void. On his flagship, Admiral Junho watched in silence. Around him, his crew stood frozen. Some were crying, some were shaking with rage. All of them waited for orders. Junho said nothing. He simply turned and walked to his quarters. He closed the door. He sat in the darkness for a long time. In her destroyed laboratory on the ruined station, Hana's final research had been stored. It was gone now. All of it. Years of work, trying to build bridges between species, turned to ash and silence. Captain Minho received the news while on patrol. He watched the footage 3 times. Then he turned off the screen and stared at the stars. His parents had died in an alien raid 20 years ago. He had joined the military to protect others from suffering the same fate. He had followed every order. He had maintained peace, and now, 2,000 more were dead. On Earth, Elder Counselor Jiho Baek watched from his hospital bed. His old heart ached, his hands trembled. He had seen war before. He knew what was coming. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far. Emergency sessions were called across human space. Military commanders met in secret. Politicians gathered behind closed doors. A question hung in the air, unspoken but felt by all. How much longer? Ambassador Tejo returned to Earth. For the first time in 30 years, he had no words of hope. No assurances that things would improve. No faith that patience would win. He walked into the council chamber and faced the leaders of humanity. His voice was quiet when he spoke. I have spent my life believing that we could earn our place among the stars through peace and patience. I was wrong. They do not see our patience as virtue. They see it as weakness. They do not see our peace as strength. They see it as submission. We have given them every chance. They have answered with blood. He paused. The chamber was silent. I do not know what we should do next. I only know that what we have been doing is not working. Our people are dying. Our children are dying. And the galaxy does not care. He sat down. No one spoke. In the silence, something shifted. Something old and terrible began to wake. 200 years of peace had not erased humanity's past. Beneath the kindness, beneath the patience, beneath the desperate hope for a better future, something ancient still waited. The galaxy had forgotten, but humanity remembered. 1 week after the medical station burned, humanity's leaders gathered in a place of memory. The old United Nations building had been preserved for 3 centuries. Once, it had been where nations argued and fought and tried to find common ground. Now, it was where humanity would decide its future. Every seat was filled. Military commanders sat beside scientists. Politicians sat beside artists. Young and old. From every corner of Earth and every colony among the stars, they had come. The weight of history pressed down on them all. No one spoke above a whisper. Ambassador Tejo walked to the podium. He moved slowly, like a man carrying a heavy burden. He looked out at the faces before him and saw his own exhaustion reflected back. 30 years, he began. I have served as your voice among the stars for 30 years. In that time, I have done everything in my power to earn us a place in the galactic community. I have smiled when I wanted to scream. I have apologized for crimes we never committed. I have watched our people suffer and told them to be patient. His voice cracked. He paused, gathering himself. I was wrong. The chamber was silent. They do not respect us. They never have. They never will. We are not people to them. We are insects. We are dirt. We are something to be used and discarded. I know this now. I should have known it long ago. He stepped back from the podium. He had no more words. Admiral Junho rose next. He walked with the steady calm of a man who had made peace with what was coming. A holographic display flickered to life behind him, showing star maps and fleet positions. For 200 years, we have hidden our true strength, he said. When we first reached the stars, we saw how the elder races treated each other. We saw their wars. We saw their cruelty. We decided that we would not repeat their mistakes. We would build our power in secret and pray that we never had to use it. The display changed. Ships appeared, thousands of them, designs that no alien had ever seen. This is the United Earth Fleet. Not the ships we show the galaxy. The real fleet. 23,000 warships. Weapons that can crack planets. Technologies that would make the elder races weep with envy. We have been preparing for this day since we first left Earth. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many had suspected. Few had known the truth. Colonel Subin Choi took the floor. Her voice was cold and precise. I have spent my career studying our enemies. I know their fleet deployments. I know their defense networks. I know their weaknesses. The Veliks believe they are invincible. They are not. The Marathi believe their numbers will protect them. They will not. Every species that has mocked us, every species that has hurt us, has done so because they thought we could not fight back. She paused. They are wrong. The display showed tactical projections, strike points, invasion routes, victory probabilities. The numbers were overwhelming. If we choose to act, we will win. That is not hope. That is mathematics. She returned to her seat. The chamber sat in stunned silence. Dr. Hana Yoon was the last to speak. She walked to the podium slowly. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. I have spent my life trying to understand other species. I believed that empathy could bridge any gap. I believed that if we were patient and kind, they would eventually see us as equals. She looked down at her notes. Names, hundreds of names. These are the children who died on the medical station. Yuna, age 4. Jiwoo, age 7. Sumin, age 3. Dohyun, age 5. She read for several minutes. Each name hung in the air like a wound. I have no more words of peace. I have no more hope for understanding. I only have names. Names of the dead. Names that the galaxy will never remember. She set down her notes. But we will remember. We will always remember. The chamber was silent as she returned to her seat. Elder Counselor Jiho Baek rose last. He was frail. He needed help to stand. But his eyes were clear. And his voice carried across the room. I am old. I was born before humanity reached the stars. I fought in the last war on Earth. I know what war is. I know the cost. I know the horror. I know the nightmares that never end. He paused, looking out at the assembly. For 200 years, we chose peace. We chose patience. We chose hope. We did this because we knew what we were. We knew what we could become. We were terrified of ourselves. We thought that if we could just be gentle enough, kind enough, patient enough, we could leave our violent past behind, forever. His voice hardened. We were fools. The word echoed through the chamber. The galaxy does not reward kindness. It does not respect patience. It only understands one thing: strength. We have strength. We have always had strength. We simply chose not to use it. That choice has cost us everything. Our dignity, our safety, our children. He straightened, standing tall despite his age. They have forgotten what we are. They look at us and see sheep. They do not see the wolves we used to be. They do not know that we stopped being wolves by choice, not by nature. They do not understand that the wolf is still there, waiting, watching, hungry. He turned to face the council directly. I call for a vote. For the first time in 2 centuries, I call for the authorization of total war. Not limited action. Not defensive measures. Total war. Let them see what they have awakened. Let them remember what we are. The chamber erupted in whispers. Then, slowly, silence returned. The vote was called. One by one, representatives stood. One by one, they said the same word. Yes, yes, yes. When it was done, the result was unanimous. For the first time in 200 years, humanity had chosen war. Admiral Junho received the order on his personal communicator. He read it twice. Then he looked up at his crew. Prepare the fleet. Across human space, sealed orders were opened. Commanders who had spent their careers maintaining peace now faced a different task. Some were afraid. Some were eager. All of them understood the weight of what was coming. Captain Minho Lee stood on the bridge of the time-silent Thunder Asterisk. He had waited 20 years for this moment. He had dreamed of it. He had feared it. Now it was here. He looked at his crew. Young faces, old faces, all of them ready. They wanted to know what humans can do, he said quietly. They laughed at our patience. They mocked our kindness. They killed our children and expected us to bow. He turned to face the stars. No more bowing, no more patience, no more mercy. He smiled for the first time in months. Let's show them what we are. Across the galaxy, human ships went dark. Communications ceased. The assembly noticed and laughed. They thought humanity had given up. They thought the sheep had finally accepted their place. They had no idea what was coming. In the darkness of space, 23,000 warships moved toward their targets. Silent, patient, unstoppable. The day no species would forget was about to begin. For 3 days, no human ship responded to any signal. Commerce stopped. Diplomatic channels went silent. Human colonies sealed their ports and refused all visitors. The galaxy watched and waited. The assembly held an emergency session. Representatives argued about what it meant. Some thought it was a protest. Others believed humanity had finally broken, retreating into isolation. The Velix representative laughed loudest of all. "They are cowards," he declared. "They have accepted their place. Soon they will come crawling back, begging for scraps. This is what happens when you push the weak. They crumble." Others nodded in agreement. Humanity had always been weak. Humanity would always be weak. This silence was simply the final proof. On the fourth day, they learned how wrong they were. Admiral Junho's fleet emerged from hyperspace directly above the Velix homeworld. 1,700 warships materialized in perfect formation, filling the sky with metal and fire. They had traveled through routes the Velix did not know existed, using engines the Velix did not know were possible. The Velix Grand Fleet was legendary. It had crushed 100 enemies over 10,000 years. It had never known defeat. Within minutes, every ship in that fleet was scrambling to respond. The Velix admiral broadcast a demand for immediate surrender. His voice was confident, arrogant. He had 4,200 ships. The humans had less than half that. The math was simple. Admiral Junho responded with a single transmission. It was a recording. The names of the children who died on the medical station, read one, by Dr. Hana Yoon. Nothing else. No demands, no threats, just names. The Velix admiral ordered his fleet to attack. The battle lasted 14 minutes. Human weapons cut through Velix shields like they were paper. Human ships moved in patterns the Velix could not predict or counter. Human targeting systems identified weak points that Velix engineers had thought were impossible to find. The Grand Fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia ceased to exist. 4,000 ships became debris. Hundreds of thousands of Velix soldiers died in the cold silence of space. Not a single human vessel was lost. Admiral Junho watched the destruction from his bridge. His face showed no joy, no satisfaction, only grim determination. This was not vengeance. This was necessity. This was the price of finally being taken seriously. "Open a channel to the planet," he said. The Velix homeworld appeared on screen. Billions of people looked up at a sky filled with human warships. For the first time in their history, they knew fear. "This is Admiral Junho Park of the United Earth Fleet. Your military has been destroyed. Your leaders have a choice. Surrender unconditionally and face justice for your crimes, or we will continue. This is not a negotiation. You have 1 hour." He closed the channel. Across the galaxy, other fleets struck at the same moment. Captain Minho Lee led a strike force against the Marathi Collective's shipyards. The collective had spent centuries building their industrial might. In a single night, 80% of it was gone. Minho walked through the burning wreckage of a Marathi command station. His soldiers moved beside him, silent and efficient. They had trained for this their entire lives. They had waited so long. A Marathi officer stumbled out of the smoke, hands raised in surrender. His eyes were wide with terror. "Impossible," he gasped. "Your technology. Your weapons. This is impossible." Minho looked at him calmly. "You thought we were weak," he said. "You thought our patience meant we could not fight. You were wrong." He signaled his soldiers to take the prisoner. "We never wanted this. Remember that. You pushed us here. You killed our children. You laughed at our suffering. You made this choice for us." On 12 different worlds, human ground forces landed. Soldiers descended from warriors of every Earth culture, fought side by side. They moved with precision and discipline that shocked their enemies. Aliens who had mocked human fighters now fled at the sight of them. The Velix had believed humans were soft. They had never seen humans fight. They had never studied human history. They did not know about the wars humanity had fought against itself. They did not know about the horrors humans had survived. They did not know what waited inside the human soul. Now they learned. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. Panic filled the chamber. Representatives who had laughed at humanity now trembled in their seats. The Velix homeworld had fallen. The Marathi military was shattered. Human fleets were appearing everywhere. The assembly demanded that humanity surrender immediately. They threatened consequences. They warned of united retaliation. Ambassador Tejo's hologram appeared in the chamber. He was smiling for the first time in 30 years. "You wanted to discuss humanity's place in the galaxy," he said. "We are ready to negotiate. We suggest you bring everyone." His image flickered out. In the silence that followed, the representatives looked at each other. Some were crying. Some were praying. All of them understood that the galaxy had changed forever. Dr. Hana Yoon broadcast from the site of the destroyed medical station. Human engineers had built a memorial there, a ring of lights marking where the station had once floated. She stood before the cameras, her voice steady. 1 year ago, 2,000 people died here. Doctors who healed the sick, nurses who comforted the dying, children who had done nothing wrong. The galaxy ignored their deaths. The assembly set aside our pleas. We were told our lives did not matter. She paused, looking at the stars. Today, we answer. Not with anger, not with hate, with action. Every leader who ordered our deaths will answer for their crimes. Every world that laughed while our children burned will learn the price of that laughter. She turned back to the camera. We did not want this. We wanted peace. We wanted friendship. We wanted only to be treated with dignity. You refused. You laughed. You killed. And now you will remember. From this day forward, you will always remember what happens when humanity stops being patient. On Earth, Elder Counselor Jiho Baek watched the reports from his hospital bed. Velix surrender, Marathi collapse, human flags rising on a dozen worlds. His old heart ached with a mixture of sorrow and pride. He had fought in wars before. He knew the cost. He knew the nightmares that would follow. He knew that victory did not mean happiness. But he also knew that sometimes there was no other choice. A nurse came to check on him. She was young. She had grown up in an age of peace. The war was something new and frightening to her. "Is it over?" she asked. Jiho shook his head slowly. "The fighting will end soon, but the real work is just beginning. We have shown them what we are. Now we must show them who we can be. That is the harder task." He closed his eyes. "We waited so long. We gave them so many chances. We begged them to stop. They forgot what we are." He sighed deeply. Now they remember. Across the galaxy, species that had never thought twice about humanity now spoke of nothing else. The ancient powers had been humbled in days. The order that had stood for 10,000 years had shattered like glass. And humanity, the species everyone had dismissed as weak and worthless, stood at the center of it all. Patient no more. Silent no more. Ignored no more. The day no species recalled had become the day no species would ever forget. 1 year after the war began, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. The old order was gone. The ancient powers that had ruled for 10,000 years now sat in silence, waiting to learn their fate. And humanity, once mocked and dismissed, now held the future in its hands. The Velix Dominion had been dissolved. Its leaders sat in prison cells, awaiting trials for crimes against humanity. The fleets that had terrorized the stars were scrap metal. The arrogance that had defined them for millennia had turned to ash and fear. The Marathi collective existed only in name. Their military was gone. Their shipyards were ruins. Their representatives came to every meeting with heads bowed, speaking only when spoken to. They had learned humility the hard way. Across the galaxy, species that had never noticed humanity now watched them with a mixture of fear and fascination. The insects had become giants. The dirt had become diamond. The sheep had revealed themselves as wolves. But humanity did not want to be wolves forever. A new galactic charter was being drafted. Human diplomats sat at the center of the negotiations, but they did not demand supremacy. They did not seek revenge. They asked only for what they had always wanted: equality. Ambassador Tejo Kang stood before the new assembly. The chamber was different now. Human architects had helped redesign it. Every species had an equal seat. No one stood above anyone else. "We did not fight this war to conquer," Tejo said. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of everything he had witnessed. "We fought because we had no choice. We fought because our children were dying and no one cared. We fought because patience and kindness were seen as weakness, and weakness was punished with death." He paused, looking around the chamber. "That ends now. This charter guarantees equal rights to every species. No race will be contained, no people will be dismissed, no children will die because the galaxy thinks their lives do not matter. If any species violates these principles, they will face consequences, not from humanity alone, but from all of us together." The vote was unanimous. Every species approved. Some did so out of genuine belief in the new order. Others did so out of fear. But all of them understood that the galaxy had changed, and there was no going back. Admiral Junho Park retired 3 months after the war ended. He had no desire for monuments or medals. He had done what was necessary. Now, he wanted only peace. He bought a small farm in the Korean countryside. The same hills his ancestors had farmed for generations. He planted rice and vegetables. He raised chickens. He watched the sun rise and set over land that had known humanity's touch for 10,000 years. Sometimes, visitors came. Young officers who wanted to meet the legend. Historians who wanted to record his story. Politicians who wanted his endorsement. He turned them all away. "I am not a hero," he told them. "I am a soldier who did his duty. The real heroes are the ones who died. The children on that medical station. The families on that frozen moon. They are the ones we should remember." He lived quietly for the rest of his days. He never spoke publicly about the war again. Captain Minho Lee was promoted to admiral, the youngest in human history. He accepted the rank reluctantly, knowing that it came with responsibilities he had never wanted. But someone had to lead, and he had proven himself capable. On the anniversary of the war's end, he visited his parents' graves for the first time in years. They had died in an alien raid when he was a child. He had spent his whole life carrying that pain, using it as fuel for his determination. He knelt before their headstones and spoke quietly. "It's over. The ones who hurt you, who hurt so many of us, they've been stopped. We showed them what we are. We made them remember." He placed flowers on the graves. "I hope you're proud. I hope you can finally rest. I hope wherever you are, you know that your son kept fighting until the end." He stayed there until sunset, then returned to his duties. Dr. Hana Yoon went back to her research. She had spent years trying to build bridges between species, and for a long time, she had believed that work was wasted. Now she understood that it was more important than ever. The war had proven what humanity could do. Now it was time to prove what humanity could be. She traveled to dozens of worlds, studying cultures, learning languages, helping species understand each other. She trained a new generation of xenobiologists, teaching them that understanding was not weakness, kindness was not submission, peace was not cowardice. "We won the war with weapons," she told her students. "We will win the peace with wisdom. That is the harder fight. That is the fight that truly matters." Colonel Subin Choi destroyed her classified files. The weapons humanity had revealed during the war were terrifying enough. Some secrets were better left buried. She retired from intelligence work and took a position teaching military history. Her students learned about the great wars of Earth, the conflicts that had shaped humanity before they reached the stars. They learned that humans had always been capable of terrible violence, and that was exactly why they had worked so hard to become peaceful. "We are not gentle because we are weak," she told them. "We are gentle because we are strong. We choose peace because we know the alternative. Never forget that. Never let the galaxy forget it either." The new Galactic Assembly met regularly. Disputes were resolved through negotiation, not force. Trade flowed freely. Species that had been enemies for millennia learned to coexist. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than what came before. Ambassador Teho Kang served as humanity's voice for another decade. He watched the new order take shape, guiding it when he could, stepping back when he should. When he finally retired, he was honored by 100 species as one of the architects of peace. At his retirement ceremony, he gave a short speech. "I spent the first half of my career being ignored. I spent the second half being feared. Neither was what I wanted. What I wanted was respect. Simple respect, given freely between equals. That is what we have built. That is what we must protect. Not with weapons, though we have those. With wisdom, with patience, with the understanding that every species, no matter how different, deserves dignity." He stepped down from the podium and disappeared from public life. Elder Counselor Jiho Baek passed away peacefully at the age of 113. He died in his sleep, surrounded by family, with a smile on his face. He had lived long enough to see humanity take its rightful place among the stars. In his final letter, found after his death, he wrote words that would be remembered for generations. "We never wanted war. We wanted only to be left in peace, to raise our children, to explore the stars with wonder in our hearts. They mistook our patience for weakness. They mistook our kindness for cowardice. They forgot the truth that every species should remember." The letter continued, "Humans are not peaceful because we cannot fight. We are peaceful because we know, better than anyone, the cost of war. We gave them every chance. We begged them to stop. They did not listen." The final lines were simple. Now the galaxy will never forget. When humanity's tolerance finally snaps, stars themselves learn to fear. But fear is not our goal. Understanding is. Peace is. We showed them our darkness so they would respect our light. May they never forget either. His words were carved into a memorial on Earth, where the old United Nations building still stood. Visitors came from across the galaxy to read them. Some came out of curiosity. Some came out of respect. Some came to remember what they had learned, and to make sure they never forgot. The stars that had once seemed so cold and distant now glowed with possibility. Humanity had found its place among them, not through submission, not through conquest, through the simple insistence that they deserved to be treated with dignity. They had waited so long. They had endured so much. They had given chance after chance, hoping against hope that kindness would be repaid with kindness. In the end, they had been forced to fight. But they had won more than a war. They had won a future where no species would be dismissed, where no children would die, forgotten, where peace was built on respect, not fear. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was theirs, and they would protect it forever.